If you've been following the Las Vegas Strip over the past 2 years, you've probably heard about Fontainebleau, the massive blue tower on the north end of the Strip, standing 67 stories tall, was supposed to be the next big thing in luxury hospitality. Drawing from the iconic Fontainebleau brand that made Miami Beach famous in the 1950s, this Las Vegas iteration promised to bring that same level of glamour and sophistication to Nevada. The property opened its doors on December 13th, 2023, with enormous fanfare, boasting 3,644 hotel rooms, 36 restaurants and bars, a sprawling 173,000 square foot casino, high-end retail along what they call the Grand Promenade, and signature entertainment venues including the Blow Live Theater for concerts and the LEV nightclub and day club. On paper, it looked like a guaranteed success. The building itself is architecturally stunning, with sleek modern design, floor-to-ceiling windows, and that distinctive curved blue glass facade that's visible from miles away on the interstate. The interior features soaring ceilings, contemporary art installations, and a color palette dominated by cool blues, whites, and silvers that give it a distinctly modern, almost futuristic aesthetic. Everything about Fontainebleau was designed to attract high-end gamblers, affluent international travelers, and wealthy guests who spend generously on premium experiences. But less than 2 years after opening, Fontainebleau Las Vegas is confronting a perfect storm of significant financial pressures, operational instability, regulatory investigations, and a broader slowdown in Las Vegas tourism that has made it particularly difficult for this newcomer to gain any real traction. What was supposed to be a triumphant addition to the Strip has instead become a cautionary tale about overambitious planning, misreading the market, and the brutal reality of competing in one of the most saturated luxury hotel markets in the world. The property that cost $3.7 billion to build is now struggling to fill its rooms, staff its restaurants, and generate the kind of consistent revenue needed to service its massive debt load. Reports from the months immediately following its opening indicated the resort was hemorrhaging up to $400,000 per day in losses. That's not a typo. $400,000 every single day. This staggering figure stemmed from operational costs like staffing thousands of employees, aggressive marketing campaigns to build brand awareness, and routine but expensive necessities like maintenance, utilities, and insurance, all of which were dramatically outpacing incoming revenue from room bookings, gaming activity, and food and beverage sales combined. By late 2025, the situation remains deeply strained. Las Vegas as a whole has experienced a clear and measurable decline in visitor numbers compared to 2024. Fewer people are arriving by air travel, convention bookings are down significantly, and the overall tourism momentum that carried Vegas through the post-pandemic recovery has noticeably cooled. This broader industry downturn has hit newer properties, especially hard, and Fontainebleau's position on the far north end of the Strip has only amplified these challenges. Unlike properties in the heart of the action, between Bellagio and Caesar's Palace, or even the newer developments like Park MGM and Aria that benefit from central locations, Fontainebleau sits in relative isolation. It's positioned next to Resorts World, which itself has struggled with similar issues, and it requires guests to make a deliberate choice to travel that far north. There's no natural foot traffic. Tourists walking the Strip from south to north typically lose steam somewhere around the Venetian or Wynn. Very few casual visitors make it all the way up to Fontainebleau unless they're specifically staying there or have a reservation for a show or restaurant. This geographic disadvantage cannot be overstated. In Las Vegas, location is everything, and being on the periphery means you're constantly fighting an uphill battle for visibility and spontaneous visits. The resort's core strategy has been to focus almost exclusively on wealthier guests. High-stakes players at premium table games, shoppers browsing designer boutiques along the Grand Promenade, and exclusive pool club users willing to pay hundreds of dollars for a daybed. This approach is designed to maximize revenue per guest during peak periods, and in theory it makes sense. Why chase volume when you can chase margin? But in practice, this strategy has proven to be fundamentally flawed in the current Las Vegas environment. The reality is that Las Vegas operates on a diverse economic base. The city thrives because it serves everyone. There are locals who come in for daily gaming sessions at their favorite slot machines. There are budget tourists who book cheap rooms and spend their money on shows, buffets, and mid-tier gambling. There are convention attendees who fill hotels during the week and spend on business dinners and networking events. And yes, there are high rollers who drop six figures at baccarat tables and book penthouse suites. But by overemphasizing the high-end segment and essentially ignoring everyone else, Fontainebleau has left massive gaps in consistent activity. The result is a property that feels perpetually underutilized. Those expansive public areas with their dramatic high ceilings, large-scale art installations, and carefully curated design elements often sit nearly empty. Guests frequently describe walking through sections of the casino or the Grand Promenade and feeling like they're in a beautiful but impersonal space. Something more akin to a corporate office lobby or a high-end shopping mall after closing time than a vibrant, energetic casino resort. Not all 36 of the property's restaurants and bars operate at full capacity. Some have reduced hours. Others have been closed entirely or converted to different concepts in an attempt to find something that resonates with guests. The retail zones, which were supposed to feature luxury brands and attract serious shoppers, see shockingly little foot traffic. Walking through the Grand Promenade on a weekday afternoon, you might see more security guards and cleaning staff than actual customers. The gaming floors, which should be the revenue engine of any Las Vegas casino, often look sparse and empty, especially during off-peak hours. Rows of slot machines sit unused, and table games that should be bustling with action have dealers standing idle waiting for players who never arrive. These persistent revenue shortfalls create an intensifying pressure cycle. The property was built with a construction cost of $3.7 billion financed through a complex arrangement of loans and investment capital. That debt doesn't just sit there passively, it accrues interest. Every month, Fontainebleau has to service that debt, paying millions in interest alone before they even begin to touch the principal. Add to that the ongoing fixed expenses of running a property this size, payroll for thousands of employees, utilities for a 67-story tower, maintenance for hundreds of thousands of square feet of public space, insurance, licensing fees, marketing costs, and countless other line items. And you start to understand why the financial pressure is so intense. What makes the situation even more interesting and perhaps confusing is that despite all these documented financial pressures, the company recently acquired the adjacent 2.2-acre lot for $112.5 million. This purchase has sparked considerable speculation about Fontainebleau's true financial condition and future plans. On one hand, spending over $100 million on land when you're reportedly losing hundreds of thousands of dollars per day seems counterintuitive, possibly even reckless. On the other hand, it could signal confidence in a long-term turnaround strategy, with potential plans for future expansion such as additional hotel towers, convention facilities, or entertainment venues that could help drive more consistent traffic to the property. It could also be a defensive move, preventing a competitor from acquiring that land and potentially building something that would further complicate Fontainebleau's already difficult market position. Real estate strategy in Las Vegas is often about thinking decades ahead, not just quarters ahead. So this acquisition might make more sense in a longer time horizon than it does in the immediate present. Beyond the financial challenges, Fontainebleau has also struggled significantly with operational stability and personnel management. Staffing has been problematic since the day the property launched. In May of this year, the resort made headlines when it laid off 60 table game dealers as part of broader efforts to control spiraling labor costs and improve overall financial stability. While these layoffs provided some short-term relief to the balance sheet, they also had immediate negative impacts on service quality and guest experience. Fewer dealers means longer wait times for table games, reduced game variety during off-peak hours, and an overall sense that the property is cutting corners. For a resort that positions itself as ultra-luxury and charges premium prices, having visibly reduced staffing sends exactly the wrong message to guests. It creates a perception of decline, of a property in distress, which becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy as guests choose to stay elsewhere. Leadership stability has been an even bigger issue. Since opening, Fontainebleau Las Vegas has experienced a revolving door of executive departures that would be concerning for any company, but is especially troubling for a property that desperately needs consistent strategic direction. Major departures have included the chief financial officer, the chief technology officer, the chief operating officer, and even the director of beverage development. These aren't entry-level positions. These are the people responsible for financial planning, technology infrastructure, day-to-day operations, and creating the food and beverage experiences that are supposed to differentiate the property. When executives at this level leave in rapid succession, it suggests deep internal problems. It could be disagreements over strategy, dissatisfaction with ownership decisions, burnout from trying to manage an impossible situation, or simply recognition that the ship is sinking and it's time to find a lifeboat. Whatever the reasons, this kind of leadership instability makes it nearly impossible to execute any coherent long-term strategy. Every new executive brings their own vision, their own priorities, and their own team, which means constant disruption and lack of continuity. Adding to all of these operational and financial challenges is an ongoing federal investigation into the property's compliance with anti-money laundering regulations. This is not a minor regulatory hiccup. This is a serious legal matter that could result in substantial penalties, operational restrictions, or even threats to the property's gaming license. Documents filed by the Nevada Gaming Control Board have alleged that Fontainebleau issued casino credit to patrons without completing the mandatory verification processes designed to detect and prevent illicit activity. In plain English, this means the casino was allegedly extending credit, sometimes substantial amounts, to gamblers without properly checking whether that money might be connected to criminal activity, money laundering, or other illegal sources. Nevada's gaming regulators take anti-money laundering compliance extremely seriously, and for good reason. Casinos have historically been vulnerable to being used as vehicles for laundering illegal proceeds, and the state has implemented strict protocols to prevent this. When a property fails to follow these protocols, it's not just a paperwork problem. It's a fundamental breach of the regulatory framework that allows casinos to operate. Nevada gaming officials have stated publicly that they are investigating alleged money laundering activities and that the resort may have been issuing credit without the necessary approvals, which would constitute a clear violation of state anti-money laundering laws. Fontainebleau President Maurice Wooden has responded to these allegations by stating that any possible violations occurred before he assumed his leadership role last year, essentially arguing that he inherited these problems rather than creating them. The Nevada Gaming Commission voted to grant Wooden a 2-year limited license, allowing him to continue in his role while the investigative and audit processes play out. This decision suggests that regulators believe the problems are fixable and that new leadership deserves a chance to correct course, but it also means the property will be operating under a cloud of regulatory scrutiny for the foreseeable future. The investigation is still ongoing, and depending on what investigators ultimately find, the consequences could range from financial penalties and enhanced compliance requirements to more severe sanctions that could impact the property's ability to operate certain aspects of its gaming business. Despite all of these significant problems, it's worth noting that guest satisfaction scores tell a somewhat different story. On TripAdvisor, Fontainebleau maintains a 4 out of 5-star rating and ranks 30th among 252 Las Vegas hotels. At first glance, this might seem like a positive indicator. A 4-star rating is generally considered good, and being in the top 30 out of more than 250 properties suggests the resort is doing something right. But when you dig deeper, these numbers are actually quite concerning for a property of this caliber and price point. This is supposed to be a top-tier, ultra-luxury resort that costs $3.7 billion to build and charges premium rates that compete directly with properties like Wynn, Encore, Bellagio, and Aria. Those properties consistently rank in the top 10, often in the top 5. For a brand new luxury resort to be sitting at number 30, below properties that are decades older and significantly less expensive, suggests that guest expectations are not being met. When you're charging $400, $500, or more per night for a room, guests expect perfection. They expect flawless service, exceptional dining, immaculate facilities, and an overall experience that justifies the premium price. A 4-star rating and a 30th place ranking suggests that while the property isn't terrible, it's also not delivering the world-class experience that its positioning and pricing promise. The property has also found itself embroiled in legal disputes with competitors. Wynn Resorts filed a lawsuit against Fontainebleau alleging employee poaching. The lawsuit claims that Fontainebleau has been actively recruiting and hiring Wynn employees in ways that violate the contractual agreements those employees have with Wynn, potentially including non-compete clauses or confidentiality agreements. In a public statement, Wynn said, "Clearly, we want all operators in Las Vegas to be successful. It's good for the city in which we all live. We just want them to succeed without interference in the contractual agreements that our employees have negotiated with us." The lawsuit seeks both a restraining order to prevent further alleged poaching and financial damages to compensate for the harm caused. This legal battle adds another layer of complexity and cost to Fontainebleau's already challenging situation. Legal fees for this kind of corporate litigation can easily run into the millions, and if Wynn prevails, the damages could be substantial. Beyond the financial cost, the lawsuit also damages Fontainebleau's reputation in the industry and creates tension with a direct competitor that literally sits next door. One of Fontainebleau's biggest structural problems is that it's trying to compete in the ultra-luxury hotel category in possibly the worst location for that strategy. The property is sleek, modern, and brand new, with contemporary design that looks like it belongs in Dubai or Singapore. But when you examine where it's actually located, the competitive landscape is absolutely brutal. Fontainebleau sits directly adjacent to Resorts World, Encore, and Wynn, three properties that already define what true Las Vegas luxury looks like. Wynn and Encore especially have had years, in some cases decades, to perfect every aspect of their operations. They've refined their service standards, built relationships with high-value guests who return year after year, developed restaurant concepts with celebrity chefs that have become destinations in their own right, and cultivated that intangible sense of old-school Vegas prestige that keeps wealthy guests coming back. Steve Wynn, whatever you think of him personally, understood luxury hospitality at a level that few people in the industry have ever matched. The properties that bear his name reflect that obsessive attention to detail and commitment to excellence. For a brand new property like Fontainebleau, trying to compete directly with that level of established luxury while charging comparable or even higher prices is an extraordinarily difficult challenge. Fontainebleau is still in the process of filling in some of its spaces, figuring out which restaurant concepts work and which don't, training staff to deliver consistent service, and trying to build up that same sense of excitement and prestige that its neighbors have spent years cultivating. It's the new kid on the block trying to sit at the cool kids' table, and the cool kids aren't particularly interested in making room. Guests who are accustomed to staying at Wynn or Encore have very little incentive to switch to Fontainebleau unless the new property offers something genuinely better or meaningfully different. And so far, it hasn't. The rooms are nice, but so are the rooms at Wynn. The restaurants are good, but Wynn has multiple Michelin-starred options. The pool is beautiful, but Encore's pool has been a Vegas institution for years. Without a clear differentiator, Fontainebleau is essentially asking guests to take a chance on an unproven property. And in the luxury market, that's a very hard sell. Shortly after Fontainebleau opened, the property ran headfirst into a public relations disaster that perfectly encapsulated many of the perception problems it faces. A photo went viral on social media showing a plate of nachos from the tavern, the property's sportsbook bar. The plate consisted of exactly 6 tortilla chips, a sparse scattering of toppings, and several small condiment cups arranged around the edge. The price for this minimalist interpretation of nachos? $24. The image exploded across Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, and TikTok, with thousands of people mocking the absurd portion size and outrageous price. Memes were created, comparisons were made to airline food and prison meals. The incident became a symbol of everything people dislike about overpriced, pretentious hospitality that prioritizes aesthetics and profit margins over actual value and guest satisfaction. For a property already struggling with perceptions that it's cold, impersonal, and overpriced, this viral moment was devastating. It reinforced every negative stereotype and gave people a concrete, visual example they could point to when explaining why they would never visit Fontainebleau. The property eventually responded by adjusting the menu item, but the damage was done. In the age of social media, a single bad experience can reach millions of people in hours, and Fontainebleau learned that lesson the hard way. Another persistent criticism of Fontainebleau is that it seems to struggle with establishing its own identity. Rather than creating unique, original experiences that give guests a reason to visit, the property has repeatedly borrowed ideas that are already well known in Las Vegas, which makes it feel derivative and unoriginal. A perfect example of this is when Fontainebleau rolled out an ice skating rink and outdoor movie screenings during the winter and holiday periods. On the surface, this seems like a nice seasonal amenity that could attract families and create Instagram-worthy moments. The problem is that the Cosmopolitan has been doing exactly this for years with its rooftop ice rink and outdoor film showings, and it's become one of that property's signature seasonal attractions. When Fontainebleau launched essentially the same concept, it didn't feel innovative or exciting. It felt like a copy, like the property was looking around at what other successful resorts were doing and trying to replicate it rather than creating something genuinely new. This pattern has repeated itself across multiple aspects of the property. The nightclub feels like a version of clubs that already exist at other properties. The pool experience is nice but not meaningfully different from what you can find elsewhere. Even the art installations, while impressive, don't create the kind of wow moments that make people specifically want to visit. In a market as competitive as Las Vegas, being pretty good or similar to other options simply isn't enough. You need to be exceptional or you need to be different. Ideally, you need to be both. Fontainebleau has struggled to be either. That said, there are areas where Fontainebleau does seem to be performing well. The property's entertainment offerings, particularly the Blow Live Theater and LAV nightclub, consistently book major headliners and draw substantial crowds. When there's a big concert or a celebrity DJ appearance, you'll see the property come alive with energy as hundreds or even thousands of people converge for the event. These entertainment-driven nights are often the only times when Fontainebleau feels truly busy and vibrant, with the casino floor, restaurants, and bars all benefiting from the spillover traffic. The problem is that this creates a feast or famine dynamic. On nights with major events, the property is packed and revenue is strong. But on the many nights without a headliner, the property feels empty and struggles to generate meaningful activity. This inconsistency makes it difficult to staff appropriately, manage inventory for restaurants and bars, and create the kind of reliable, predictable revenue streams that investors and lenders want to see. Recognizing that their initial strategy of focusing exclusively on high-end guests has failed, Fontainebleau has recently made efforts to broaden their appeal and attract locals and budget-conscious travelers. One significant move was the decision to offer free parking, which might seem like a small thing, but is actually quite meaningful in Las Vegas. Most strip properties now charge for parking, with rates ranging from $15 to $30 or more per day depending on the property and whether you're a hotel guest. By offering free parking, Fontainebleau removes a barrier that prevents locals from casually visiting. Las Vegas locals are an important market segment. They come in regularly for dining, entertainment, and gaming, and they're much less price-sensitive about gambling because they're not on vacation trying to make their bankroll last. They're just out for the evening and might drop a few $100s without thinking twice about it. But locals are also practical and value-conscious. If they have to pay $20 to park, they're much more likely to just go to a locals casino or a property that offers free parking. Fontainebleau has also been posting special promotional deals, including flash sales on room rates, discounted dining packages, and other incentives designed to get people through the door and give them a reason to visit. These are smart tactical moves that should help generate more consistent traffic, but they also represent a significant strategic retreat from the property's original positioning as an ultra-luxury destination. On the labor front, there has been one positive development. The workforce successfully unionized earlier this year, securing improved wages, benefits, and working conditions through collective bargaining. While unionization increases labor costs, which is obviously a concern for a property already struggling financially, it also tends to improve employee morale, reduce turnover, and ultimately lead to better service quality. Hospitality is a people business, and the quality of the guest experience is directly tied to how well-trained, well-compensated, and well-treated the staff is. If unionization leads to a more stable, experienced, and motivated workforce, it could actually be a net positive for Fontainebleau in the long run, even if it increases costs in the short term. Guests notice when staff seem unhappy, overworked, or undertrained, and it affects their overall impression of the property. Conversely, when staff are knowledgeable, attentive, and genuinely seem to care about providing good service, it elevates the entire experience. This is truly a pivotal moment for Fontainebleau Las Vegas. The property finds itself in this difficult situation partly because of strategic miscalculations. The decision to focus almost exclusively on elite clientele in a market that requires broader appeal. The choice to build on the far north end of the Strip, where foot traffic is minimal, and the failure to create truly unique experiences that differentiate the property from established competitors. But the timing has also been unfortunate. The broader downturn in Las Vegas tourism that began in late 2024 and has continued into 2025 has made it exponentially harder for any new property to gain traction, regardless of how well conceived or well executed it might be. When the overall pie is shrinking, fighting for a slice becomes much more difficult, especially when you're competing against established brands with loyal customer bases and decades of operational experience. For Fontainebleau to survive and eventually thrive, several things need to happen. First, they need to successfully navigate the ongoing federal investigation into anti-money laundering compliance. This means cooperating fully with regulators, implementing whatever enhanced compliance measures are required, accepting whatever penalties are imposed, and demonstrating that the problems have been identified and corrected. Any perception that the property is not taking compliance seriously or is trying to minimize the issues will only make things worse. Second, they need to stabilize their leadership team. The constant executive turnover has to stop. They need to find experienced, capable leaders who understand the Las Vegas market, who can develop and execute a coherent strategy, and who are committed to staying long enough to see that strategy through. Third, they need to continue and expand their efforts to attract locals and budget travelers. The ultra-luxury, high-roller-focused strategy has demonstrably failed. The property needs consistent traffic and activity, which means appealing to a much broader demographic. This doesn't mean abandoning luxury entirely, but it does mean creating more accessible price points, more casual dining options, and more reasons for regular people to visit. Fourth, they need to create genuine differentiators. What can Fontainebleau offer that you absolutely cannot get anywhere else on the Strip? Until they can answer that question convincingly, they'll continue to struggle to pull guests away from established competitors. I've personally visited Fontainebleau about a dozen times since it opened, both as a curious industry observer and as a guest, and I can offer some first-hand perspective on what the property actually feels like. The rooms are genuinely very nice and luxurious. They're spacious, modern, well-appointed, with comfortable beds, high-quality linens, excellent bathrooms, and those floor-to-ceiling windows that offer spectacular views of the Strip or the mountains depending on which side of the building you're on. The pool area is also legitimately impressive, with multiple pools, cabanas, daybeds, and that upscale resort atmosphere that makes you feel like you're somewhere special. If the entire property delivered at the level of the rooms and pool, Fontainebleau would be a massive success. Unfortunately, the casino floor and public areas leave a lot to be desired. The emptiness of the property is magnified by the architectural choices, particularly those soaring tall ceilings and the cold color scheme dominated by blues, whites, and silvers. In a busy, energetic casino, high ceilings can create a sense of grandeur and excitement. But in a mostly empty casino, they just make the space feel cavernous and lifeless. The sound doesn't carry the same way. There's no ambient energy. You become acutely aware of how few other people are around. The color scheme, while undeniably sleek and modern, lacks warmth. It feels more like a corporate headquarters or a modern art museum than a place where people come to have fun, let loose, and enjoy themselves. Perhaps most critically, there's no compelling draw to bring people into the property itself. This is a huge problem in Las Vegas, where iconic attractions are often what differentiate one property from another and give people a reason to visit even if they're not staying there. Bellagio has the fountains, which are free, spectacular, and draw massive crowds every single day. People plan their Vegas trips around seeing the fountains, they bring their families to watch, they propose in front of them. The fountains are an iconic part of the Las Vegas experience. Wynn has the Lake of Dreams, a multimedia water feature with projections, music, and animatronics that creates a unique sensory experience. Flamingo has the wildlife habitat with live flamingos, koi ponds, and tropical landscaping that provides a completely different kind of attraction. Even smaller properties have signature elements. The Mirage had the volcano, Treasure Island had the pirate show. These attractions create reasons for people to visit, and once they're on property, they might decide to have dinner, play some slots, or book a room for their next visit. Fontainebleau's signature attraction is an upside-down 1966 Ford Galaxy suspended from the ceiling. It's certainly unusual and it's a conversation piece, but it's not something that anyone is going to go out of their way to see in person. It's not Instagram worthy in the way that the Bellagio fountains are. It doesn't create an emotional connection, it's just a car hanging from the ceiling. And after you look at it for 30 seconds, you've exhausted its entertainment value. The property desperately needs something more compelling, something that gives people a reason to make the trek to the north end of the strip. The question everyone is asking is whether Fontainebleau can correct course and not just survive, but actually thrive on the strip. The honest answer is that it's going to be extremely difficult, but it's not impossible. The property has some genuine strengths. The physical building is beautiful and well constructed. The rooms and pool are legitimately excellent. The entertainment venues are world-class and consistently book top talent. The Fontainebleau brand has real equity and recognition, particularly among people familiar with the Miami property. These are assets that can be built upon, but the challenges are substantial and multifaceted. The financial pressure from the massive debt load and ongoing losses is not going away anytime soon. The competitive environment is brutal, with established luxury properties on all sides and a shrinking overall market. The regulatory investigation creates uncertainty and potential liability. The leadership instability has prevented any consistent strategic direction. And perhaps most fundamentally, the property still hasn't figured out what it wants to be or who its core customer is. If I were advising Fontainebleau's leadership, I would recommend several specific actions. First, embrace being a locals property in addition to a tourist destination. Las Vegas locals represent a massive underserved market, and properties that successfully cater to locals enjoy much more consistent revenue streams. This means more promotions specifically targeted at Nevada residents, more casual dining options at accessible price points, better loyalty programs, and creating spaces and experiences that locals want to visit regularly. Second, create a signature attraction that's actually worth visiting. This doesn't have to be as expensive or elaborate as the Bellagio fountains, but it needs to be something genuinely unique and compelling. It could be an immersive art installation, a unique water feature, a rooftop observation deck with spectacular views, or something else entirely. But it needs to be something that people specifically want to see and experience. Third, fix the atmosphere in the casino and public areas. This might mean adjusting the lighting to be warmer and more inviting, adding more color and visual interest, creating more intimate spaces within the larger areas, or even just playing different music. The goal is to make the property feel alive and energetic even when it's not packed with people. Fourth, lean into value and accessibility rather than fighting a losing battle for ultra-luxury positioning. There's no shame in being a very nice property that's more accessible than Wynn or Bellagio. That's actually a viable market position, and there are plenty of guests who want a modern, high-quality experience without paying absolute top-tier prices. The story of Fontainebleau Las Vegas is still being written, and the ending is far from certain. This is a property that represents a $3.7 billion investment, thousands of jobs, and the hopes of investors, employees, and the broader Las Vegas community. Everyone wants it to succeed, because a thriving strip is good for the entire city. But wanting something to succeed and actually making it succeed are two very different things. Fontainebleau has a narrow window to turn things around before the financial pressures become insurmountable and more drastic measures become necessary. The next 12 to 18 months will be absolutely critical. If they can stabilize leadership, resolve the regulatory issues, broaden their customer base, create more compelling reasons to visit, and start generating consistent positive cash flow, there's a path forward. But if the losses continue, if the investigation results in serious penalties, if tourism continues to decline, or if they simply can't figure out how to differentiate themselves in this brutally competitive market, we could be looking at a very different conversation a year from now. Fontainebleau could end up being sold at a significant loss, rebranded under different ownership, or even facing the kind of financial restructuring that has claimed other ambitious Las Vegas projects over the years. What makes this situation particularly fascinating from an industry perspective is that it represents a real-time case study in how difficult it is to succeed in the modern Las Vegas market. The days when you could simply build a big, beautiful property and assume people would come are long gone. Today's guests have endless options. They're more price conscious, they're more likely to research and compare before booking, and they're less loyal to brands than previous generations. The market is also much more mature and saturated than it was during previous building booms. When Wynn opened in 2005 or when Aria opened in 2009, there was still room for new luxury properties to carve out market share. In 2025, that space has largely been filled. Every new property is taking share from existing properties rather than growing the overall market, which creates a zero-sum competitive dynamic that's much harder to navigate. Fontainebleau Las Vegas opened with enormous ambitions and expectations. It was supposed to bring the glamour and sophistication of the Miami Beach original to the desert, creating a new standard for luxury hospitality on the Strip. Instead, it has become a symbol of the challenges facing the modern casino industry: changing consumer preferences, intense competition, the difficulty of differentiating in a crowded market, and the brutal financial realities of servicing massive debt loads while trying to build a customer base from scratch. The property is not a complete failure. It has genuine strengths and has provided good experiences for many guests. But it has also fallen far short of its potential and its promises, and it now faces an uncertain future that will depend on difficult decisions, significant changes, and a fair amount of luck. Whether Fontainebleau can ultimately fulfill its original vision, or whether it will become another cautionary tale in Las Vegas history, remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: the entire industry is watching closely because the lessons learned from Fontainebleau's struggles will shape how future projects are conceived, financed, and executed for years to come.